My guest this episode is Dani Johnson, who is the co-founder and principal analyst at RedThread Research, which is a leading analyst and research firm focused on people practices in the workplace and the human capital industry. Dani, thank you so much for joining.
Thanks for having me, Joel.
So we are coming up on Pet Appreciation Week. Are you a cat person? Are you a dog person? Is there an other category that you would fall in, or are you just not an animal person altogether?
I'm not really an animal person, but we do have dogs, and I do love my dog. So dog, I guess.
I'm a dog person, but we also have cats I tolerate because my kids and my spouse love cats. So I totally understand that. I am really excited to have you on because there's been so much consolidation and movement, especially in the learning and talent development space, which I know RedThread has a close watch on. You do a lot of research in that industry. You work with a lot of organizations. With all of the mergers, acquisitions, platforms expanding, where do you see the trends in learning and talent development throughout this year and even in the future?
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to say some things that aren't sexy. Usually people want to hear about the new and shiny things. Our research showed that there are basically 7 areas where we're seeing things pop. And they're not sexy, but they're really interesting. And I think what's interesting about them is that they're incorporating some of this new technology that people are talking about, Gen AI and some of these others, to make it truly interesting. So the first one is assessment and skills. Skills has been a conversation for about 5 years. Technology is allowing us to do things with skills data that we've never been able to do before. The interesting thing that came out in this study is assessment. So assessment used to be multiple choice questions at the end of an e-learning. But the way that vendors are describing assessment and the way that organizations are talking about assessment goes much more into skills verification. So they're talking about inference and all kinds of different ways. We just finished a study on skills verification. There's basically 7 ways you can do that. And assessment covers all of those things. Like, how are you assessing whether or not somebody can actually do the thing that they say they can do? One of the other things that we're seeing that I think is really interesting is this idea of interoperability. So it used to be that any L&D tech wanted to be the tech, the front door, and the system of record and all of that. Vendors aren't talking like that anymore. They're much more aware that they're part of a larger ecosystem, and they're talking about how to get data in and data out. And that kind of dovetails with the skills discussion we're seeing as well. Skills data is becoming sort of a unifying factor in L&D and even beyond.
You mentioned the skills and the skills assessment, how that fits into the organizations. You're having companies like your Gloats, your Fuel 50s, your Phenom, your Eightfolds that are building out skills mapping and frameworks. But then on the back end, they have this product promise of being able to upskill to one degree or another. I know some of them are a little bit more developed, less developed in that area. But do you see that eating into that LMS model of one-stop shop for upskilling and for talent development?
Yeah. Interestingly, I've never really seen LMS as a one-stop shop. We have over 500 vendors in our learning or talent development database, and those vendors do a variety of things. If you look at the frequency of the functionalities they accomplish, LMS falls somewhere in the middle. So there's like 50% more of these vendors that are doing something completely different. And so I think that's where this is coming in, is we've expanded our definition of what talent development is. It's no longer taking a course in an LMS and that's all. And so coaching comes in there, and experimenting on the job comes in there, AR and VR comes in there, enablement on the job comes in there, and all of these things are working together to provide that talent management experience. And so they have to work together to make sure that that data is being rolled up to get a full understanding for the organization and for the individual of what exists.
You mentioned AI. We have a fairly clear understanding of how AI has been incorporated into talent acquisition. Where do you see it in talent development coming to fruition right now?
So I see it in lots of spaces. Pretty much, I haven't seen an area where it doesn't touch, but the things that are interesting to me are things like assessment and skills. Like, we are able to infer skills and create skills taxonomies and all kinds of things that we haven't been able to do in the past. And so in the last 18 months, we've seen tremendous progress in that place. I am unfortunately also seeing it in the content creation space. So L&D has a strong bent toward content creation. I was at Learning Technologies in the UK a couple of weeks ago, and many vendors on the floor were introducing Gen AI content creation, where you can create anything from a simple course outline to a full course with Gen AI generated video and course avatars and all that kind of stuff. So I see it as very noisy right now, and I'm hoping that we eventually come back to earth and figure out how to take some of the stupid work off our plate and not just generate more stuff.
It's a very similar paradigm parallel to the marketing applications of Gen AI and content creation, and it creates more noise instead of actually adding value. And it seems like that's the sticky point, especially with talent development, that has really struggled with adoption and utilization over the years. What excites you going forward in this space with talent development?
I think everything. That's both optimistic and maybe a little bit naive to say, but I feel like we're at this apex, like we're actually going to do something grand as an L&D function. We have always sat in a silo off to the side of an organization and took orders. It feels like because of the pandemic and because of the technology and this focus on the skills that we have a real opportunity to do something bigger. And if you take some of the things that we talked about, like Gen AI and skills, their ability to scale and their ability to take some of that stupid work off the plates of L&D, that we can become more strategic. We can find our ways into other talent development functions and into the organization much more broadly. So we're not sitting off to the side.